Welcome back to Living with a Classic, and if you're new to my channel, I hope you stick around and consider subscribing. I put in your videos twice a week, so there's always something new and fun to watch here on the channel. In today's video, I'm going to continue working on my wife's new 2006 Range Rover. It has the 4.2 liter supercharged Jaguar V8. I know some of you guys are missing the Jaguar content, and I'm sorry that's a little bit delayed, but I need to get this Range Rover on the road first because, of course, it's for my wife. I want her to have a nice car to drive, and I want to look it over before she starts driving it so nothing happens and leaves her stranded on the side of the road. So if you're waiting for Jaguar content, I promise it's coming really soon. There are a lot of videos coming very soon on that. But back to the Range Rover. So I'm also a little bit stressed on time because I've been sick and I'm behind on other things. So I'm trying to do a lot of stuff in a short period of time. So I have the weekend now to try and do some service work. We're going to do the oil and filter change out the thermostat because it doesn't get up in temperature. It only goes up a quarter way of the scale. So also, as you might wonder later, when I change the oil, I'm not going to warm up the vehicle. I like to warm up the vehicles when you change oil, but I'm not going to just because it doesn't get warm. So there's no point in doing that. Also going to go through and change for a new battery. Hopefully get rid of all those weird error messages. And then we're going to see what I have time with. I'll do as much as I have time with. It might not be as detailed as my usual videos. It might be a little bit more fast paced, but I hope you guys will enjoy it anyways. So let's go and have a look at the old Range Rover. This is where I'll be doing the initial service work to the Range Rover just to get it out on the road and get my wife behind the wheel. It's not the most ideal place probably to work on a car, but sometimes you got to work with what you got. The main workshop is occupied with a couple of cars that I can't move at the moment that I'm also working on, and this thing was a little bit of a spontaneous purchase. Yes, we've been looking for one, but this one just sort of came up and I made them an offer, and the person accepted and we picked it up, and it was sort of really spontaneous, and it's always fun when you do spontaneous things, but then I thought about it that, well, I would ideally like to work on it in the workshop, which I can actually heat, which has nice lighting, and all of that. However, things happen, so I have to do with what I have. There is an old concrete floor in here, so I put it where it's pretty level, so there won't be any problems if I need to put it up on jack stands and those things later. There is a nicer concrete floor further into the workshop, and that's where I store some cars. However, out here, I just usually store the farm tractor and the trailer and like a lawnmower, so I've never really done anything about the floor in here. I do have a plan to someday, I'm saving up some money to finish up this building. I want to put a new concrete floor in here so everything is one flat, nice level. Finish off the walls in here, put some nice lighting and put a nice door in here and make this into just a nice garage / maybe a bigger workshop. But that's in the future. So enough babbling, let's start working on the car. And yeah, sometimes you gotta work with what you got, and that's what I'm doing here. So I set up a little light here so you guys can hopefully see. Since we're doing an oil change and coolant change and thermostat change, I need to replace, I need to remove the plastic covers underneath. There's a front one, and then there is a rear one over there that's under the engine as well. So I'm gonna remove both of those. It's just a bunch of 10mm bolts. I'll remove all of that, and then we'll have a closer look at the underside of the engine and hopefully the underside of the radiator as well. I got the covers or the skid plates off. This is the front one. That's the rear one. This is the plastic cover over the tow hitch here in the front, the tow hook. So that needs to be removed as well because there are fasteners under here, 2 on each side for the front one. Fun thing I did find was this, really disgusting, but it's an very old chapstick that was laying down there, so that was a weird thing to find. I think this is some insulation on here. It started to break up a bit, so I would clean these up before I put them back on. But a quick look at what it looks like under here. So, everything is completely massive under here. Up front, right up in there where my hand is, let me move the light so you guys can see. So behind those hoses up there, black thing there, that is the oil filter. So it's up front there. The oil drain is a little bit further back. If you see, you have the sump there. There's the front differential. And on the side of the sump right there in the middle of the screen right now that is the oil drains. Got my catch pan ready, and I already loosened this a little bit. It's 13 millimeters in case you're wondering. Let's see. And we can already see some black oil coming out. There we go. So I'm just gonna let that drain now, but I'll go on top and open up the fill cap. In the back of the engine here is the fill cap. So we'll just let that sit open like that to let it drain a little bit faster. I put my finger under the stream of oil about halfway through the drain just to feel if it was sludgy at all, because it's very, very black. It's not as black as diesel oil, but it's really, really black. I know this thing's been sitting for a year, and I think the last service that I have documented is probably 2 years ago. Not that many miles ago, but over 2 years ago. So that's why I'm changing it before we even start driving the car more. I will, however, not leave this new oil in there for too long. Probably just about, a month or two, maybe. And we don't really drive that much, so maybe about 2,500 kilometers or something. Leave it in there. We'll do an oil change again and hopefully get the inside of the engine a little bit cleaner. I don't want to use any engine cleaner in case there's a bunch of sludge. I mean, it sounds fine. It's not ticky or anything, but this is really, really black stuff. Don't let your engine oil get this far. It's still draining out, but I'm going to pour in about half a liter of fresh stuff just to push out as much of the old stuff as I can. And then I'm going to let this drain for a couple hours or overnight, because it's starting to get dark out here. So I'll let this drain overnight. When that is done draining, come back and then we'll change the filter and put in some new oil. And then we're on to draining the coolant system and replacing that thermostat. I'll let it finish draining just overnight. So all that new oil I put in has run out as well. Took some of the old oil out with it. And just going to tighten up the drain plug. You never want to tighten these too tight. Just like that, snug it down, is tight enough. Now we'll move on over to the oil filter. I have this cheap chain oil filter wrench that I've had for over 10 years, or much longer than that. I bought it when I did my first oil change on my first car a long, long time ago, and I've been meaning to replace it for a really long time, but since it's still working, I just, I haven't gone around to it. It still works just fine. And this filter was on there really, really tight, so I had to use both hands to crack it off. But now it's pretty much loose. I'm going to get a drain pan. And you see it's right behind there. And take this off. See how much oil comes out, and then we'll go get a new one. Okay, I'm just going to let that pour into the pan for a little bit there before I take it off, so try not to get on all the hoses. It's not really such a great location for an oil filter because it pours down right on this beam over here, and there's lots of hoses and stuff here, so not the most ideal place for one. I have it all the way off now, but I'm still just holding here at an angle to let the rest of it pour out. I'd rather get it on this part of the metal sort of frame up front here instead of getting it on any of the hoses. So I'll just let this hang here for a while, then I'll remove the camera and take the filter out just to not get any of the oil on the camera. It's pretty much done dripping now, so I'll grab my new filter. Since this Range Rover has a Jag engine, I have a Jaguar original filter for the 4.2 liter supercharged V8. I have put some oil on the O-ring, however I haven't pre-filled the filter. I like to pre-fill the filter whenever I can, but just a way to get it up there, I think I'll make more of a mess by doing so. So I need to snake it up here past all these hoses and then up onto there. There we go. That's starting to thread into place. Like I said before, I think this is quite a silly location for an oil filter. It's pretty tight in there. I mean, it's definitely accessible. I mean, get my whole hand in there, but still. Alright, so like you said, it just needs to be hand tight. So once it's made contact, maybe another quarter of a turn or something like I've done now, and that is tight enough. It's not going to fall off. There's no ring that seals it, and then you're helping the next guy actually be able to get this off without having to use a lot of force. Like I had to do. The filter actually got bent. I don't know if we can see that. It's on this side. You can see how the filter got bent inward by the force trying to get that off. So yeah, don't put them on that tight, and also don't let them sit for this long. This has been on there way too long. So I'm gonna change the oil and filter in this thing, like I mentioned, pretty soon, just like in a month or two. Get all of this out, and hopefully we'll have a nice clean engine inside after a few oil changes. These supercharged V8s hold about 10 liters of oil. However, during an oil and filter change, you only get out about 8, very close to 8 liters. So I'm going to start by pouring in a little over 7 liters. I'm using Castrol as recommended by Jaguar Land Rover and 5W30. So I'm going with here with the first change, and then we'll see what happens. I might use something different in the future if we find that this thing is using oil or something. We might use some extra additives, but now I'm just going to go with standard recommended oil. Another thing that's a little bit weird on these vehicles, at least I think, that the oil fill location is all the way up here, so it's quite far to get into. I had to bend my funnel a little bit to get it to fit. I know we can easily remove this part of the airbox, and I will do that a little bit later when we have to take the engine cover off. But still, I mean, that would have been nicer if it was somewhere up here so I could more easily pour into. So let's see if I can do this without spilling too much. Alright, nothing spilled so far. I've poured in about 7.5 liters now, so let's see what that looks like on the dipstick. Wipe it off once. And let's see, it is just right below max over there. So there's max and there's where it is. I will leave it like this for now. It is going to go down a little bit on the first startup when it goes into the filter and all that, but after the first startup, we'll top up the oil to the correct level. Now let's go on to draining the coolant. Once again, I'm under the car, and as you can see, I'm starting to drain the coolant. Up here, at least on 2006, and I've heard that 2006 is the last year, or 2007, there is a drain on the radiator there. So you can put a hose on right there, like I just pushed it on. It was like 9 or 10 millimeter fitting. Push the hose on, and I open that up a little bit. Starting to drain out now, so I'll go up top and open up the expansion tank, and it should start draining a lot faster. There we go. I'm just going to let that drain now, but it's looking really nice and clean coming out. It did look very clean in the expansion tank as well, so it's good. That seems like it's pretty clean in the whole system. While the last of the coolant drains, I need to remove everything in order to get to the thermostat housing. It's basically right down in here under this engine cover, but in order to get that off, I also need to take off that part over there, which is the air intake for the heating and ventilation system. It's held in place with 2 nuts, one there and one there. They're 13 millimeters. I've already removed that one. So remove that one now. Then I need to remove this piece of weather stripping here, and then that should just be able to pull out. They're both off now, so I need to take this weather stripping off. Should just lift off all the way across. I'll put that somewhere safe. And now this whole thing should just lift up and out. So let's see. And there we go. With that out of the way, I can now get to the engine cover. There are 2 10 millimeters up here, and then there are 2 back here that were covered by the piece that we just removed. I'll undo that, and this should just lift off. I've undone those now, so this whole thing should be loose. I also removed the oil filler cap. And there we go. Inside here it doesn't look too bad. Some of the insulation has fallen away here and it's a little bit loose. So I'm going to see if I can do something about that. See if I can glue it back somehow. The next thing I need to remove is this part of the air intake that goes from the air filter over into the intake itself. There's a clamp over here, a clamp there, and then there's a little hose here that you can get off. So you just push that together. There's like a plastic sort of clip. Let's see if I can do this on camera. There we go. That comes off. So it's just two little tabs that you push on. Move that to the side. Let's do the clip over here, or the clamp, I mean. When you have all these things apart, it's a good time to see that you don't have any obvious air leaks. But on such a modern car like this one, you would get a lot of error messages if you were to have any intake air leaks. But still, it's a good time to check. Start to wiggle everything loose. Alright, this one was really stuck on there. A lot of careful wiggling later and I got it off. I was going pretty carefully just back and forth. I don't want to break anything, but it's all off in one piece. And here's that inner seal as well. I'll remove that just so I don't lose it. And now we have access to the thermostat down there. Here's a closer look at the engine with everything off. Doesn't look too bad. There's a bit of corrosion on all the aluminum up here, but you can dry all this off, and if you spray it with some WD-40, you can hold that corrosion at bay. I mean, it's not really gonna erode all the way through, but it looks a lot nicer. But of course, there's a big cover on here, and that can of course trap some moisture. And it's not a new car at all. Only other thing I can see is a slight valve cover gasket leak over there, so that would be a good thing to do when I have some other things off. It's not a severe leak, but if I have to take other things off, like over here, or when I do spark plugs, might as well do the valve covers at that point. Doesn't really seem to be leaking on this side. Here is the thermostat housing, and since I have no idea when this was taken off last, and I see some oxidation on things here, I'm going to spray all these with some penetrating fluid, and I'm actually going to leave it overnight. Spray it a couple times during the evening, tomorrow as well, and then we'll try to take those off tomorrow. But I mean, if yours don't look these bad, just take them off right away. But I'm actually going to do that right now. And then I'll be back tomorrow. We can have a look and see if these are easy to take off. It's the next day, and I'm going to remove the thermostat. I've already cracked all of the bolts, and they came off really easily. So that's great, because you don't want anything like this to snap. And it is, you know, steel going into aluminum, so you never know how oxidized it could be. These two are loose. I've already removed the bottom one right there. And to get to that one, it's good to have something with a swivel end like this. They're 8mm, so that was really easy just to stick it behind there and get that out. These I should just be able to get out with my finger now, so I'll remove those and then we can get the housing apart and have a look at the thermostat. It's a pretty interesting thermostat on these cars. It's not like on a regular one where it's like a big disc and you just replace that. It's sort of like build your own thermostat. It's all in pieces with springs and everything, and you gotta take the old one out and put the new one in the same order. So we'll take this all apart now. I'm gonna see if I can get this off one-handed. There we go. And so you can see in there is the old thermostat. You can already see that it's failed. See the black rubber there and over there? It's supposed to be in the rubber O-ring all the way around, and that usually deteriorates and failed, and it's definitely failed there. So we're going to see if we can find the old one. Hopefully it's down here, so it hasn't gone down in the system. Otherwise, I guess we'll have to find that when we flush out the coolant system this summer. But yeah, so I'm going to move this aside. We'll take this apart, put in the new stuff, and I have a new O-ring all the way around the housing as well. I moved the thermostat housing above these hoses. You can more easily get to it and see stuff. Here is the new thermostat, by the way, so you just get a bag of bits. So there's the thermostat part, there's the O-ring, there's the bypass, I believe, and you have two springs in there. I dug around a bit in there and I found the missing rubber pieces. So it's one of them, so yeah, it's definitely failed, and it just had fallen down in here and gotten stuck behind the thermostat. So this thing was probably never really closing, and that's why this thing did not get up to temperature. We just go up about a quarter of the way on the scale, and stay there. So that's not good for the engine at all. You want it up to fully operating temperature, and that might also explain why the oil looks so terrible, even though it was not that long ago this thing had an oil change. It's been sitting for a while, but it hasn't done that many miles since the last oil change, so probably just that the engine never really got hot. It's the same as just doing a bunch of short trips, and that is not good for your engine and not good for your oil. So of course we're rectifying this. This thing is sort of just pushed in and twisted. You see the tabs here. So the trick is to push it in and then with some pliers twist it, and just be careful so everything doesn't shoot out. So I will take this thing off now, and then I'll show you how to put the new one in. Here's the thermostat housing all taken out. Unfortunately it wasn't recording. I don't really know what happened, but I'll show you how to put everything back together, and it's basically just a reversal of that to take it out. However, one thing happened that can happen on these cars is here's the pin that sits, I believe it's this way, sits in the middle there. That came loose, so that was stuck in the housing. You see the pin that's on there, so that was stuck, left behind in there. So I just grabbed some big pliers, twisted it back and forth a couple of times, and then it pulled straight out. So we're gonna have to check that that hole is pretty clear and good, because the pin needs to be able to slide smoothly in there. So I'm gonna make sure that that is nice and clean inside. We're also gonna take a new part of the thermostat, just sort of put that in there and feel that, yeah, no problem, that slides back and forth in there. So that's not going to be an issue at all. So this is the order of things. So we're just going to lay all the new stuff out in the correct order, and then we'll put it back in. So let's start with this end. So this is the outer piece. This is the way it goes. These are the locking tabs that will lock into place here. Then you have the small spring, it goes inside. You have the outer spring over on top of that. And then you have the thermostat part with the rubber disc, which goes this way. And all of that, let's see, probably not putting it all together, but that goes in there. This all goes over it. And you should be able to do this just with your hands. So let's see. So put it in there and twist. So I'll push it in all the way with my hand, and then I'll use a plier here just to get the tab over. If you have very strong fingers, you can do that way as well, but that works really well. Now you can see it's all in place, and just look that the O-ring looks nice in the thermostat, and everything looks centered. And yeah, it's all springy. So that should be fine. Now I'm just going to get a small thin little screwdriver, get this old O-ring out, we'll replace that, and then it's just a matter of bolting it back in place. Got a new seal here around the thermostat house, so we're going to get the old one out, and it almost feels like it's below sort of the level of the housing here, so it's amazing that it did seal, but it seems like these sort of gaskets, very similar to like the ones on some big SU carbs as well, like the HIF, that they do seem to seal really well until you take them apart, and then they will not seal again, of course. So every single time you take something like this apart, or just replace all the gaskets, or in this case it's an O-ring, or a square cut O-ring. So I'm just going to take my little screwdriver here, just make sure that I don't feel any oxidation, but so far the inside of the engine here, at least inside the coolant system, looks really nice and clean. I can't see any oxidation on the aluminum. Everything looks really nice. It looks a lot nicer on the inside than it does on the outside, actually. And the coolant looks very, very nice and clean. And I'm not sure if you can see on camera, but it's a lot thicker. It's sticking up maybe 2 or 3 millimeters above the housing, and the other one was almost below the housing. So we'll just get all of that into place, and I'll just tighten all of those little 8mm bolts down, and then we're ready to fill it back up again with some coolant. Thermostat housing is all bolted together. I've double checked that I closed the drain on the radiator, so it's time to fill up the coolant system again. Normally when you have the coolant system apart like this and emptied, I'd say it's a great time to change the coolant. However, I'm not going to do that this time. The coolant that came out was very, very clean. Looks and smells pretty much brand new. I collected it in a clean container and I poured it into some clean jugs so we can pour it back in. The other reason I'm really doing it also is because before the summer I plan on replacing the coolant lines or the coolant hoses on this engine. I think they're all original, and especially some of the small lines up under the supercharger are prone to leaking or blowing out in the summer. So we're going to replace all of those. When I have all of that apart, I'm going to flush out the coolant system. So I might as well replace the coolant then in a couple of months. This stuff looks really nice and clean. So I will just pour all of this back in. And then we're going to do one more thing on the service thing right now. We're going to replace that big old battery. In case you haven't noticed, I have now flipped the bonnet into the service position, sort of like you can do on certain old Mercedes as well. But it's very neat because you need to do that to get the battery out. In order to do it, you just disconnect the gas struts up here on both sides, and then make sure you hold on to it because it's going to come down. It's really heavy. Then you just put it up 90 degrees, and here is a small piece of metal that usually sits here that you can bend over and hook into these tabs on each side, and that will then support the bonnet up in a vertical position like this, or at 90 degrees. I would probably not do this outside if it were windy, but if you're inside it should be fine. So now I have access to get the battery out here. Disconnect the terminals, and then there are some hold downs here. Lift this out, clean out any debris down here, and then put the new one in. A couple minutes later and the new battery is installed and all bolted down and it's connected up again. I cleaned off the connections. They weren't really dirty at all, but just wiped them off a little bit, so that's great. Everything over there looks nice and clean. And I went into the car, and even all the interior lights already do seem a lot better. I did test a new battery just to make sure it was charged. It was 98% charged with my tester, so that's great. So I thought before we start this thing up and bleed the coolant system and also get the oil circulating, let's see if there are any codes. We didn't have a lot of codes before. I do not know if there are going to be any codes left, so I'm going to click through this thing and see if we can find if they have been erased or if I need to clear them all. While going through all the codes, I just realized I forgot to turn the ignition on, so I've restarted everything, turned on the ignition, and now I do get the engine up here, so that was my fault. Just sort of tired and forgetful. But no engine codes. Let's see, gearbox. Yeah, same codes as before, so I'm going to go through and clear all the codes, and then let's start this thing up. Everything is back in place to be able to start it up. This whole air intake thing is back. You don't need the engine cover, and you don't need the cover there in the back. I'm just going to turn off the ventilation fan so don't suck any dirt in there. So I just want to start it up and bleed the coolant system, also recheck the oil level, and then also I'm not going to put everything back right now because later on I also want to have a look at the belts and see which idler or what's making the noise, and that I need to have all this off so not to have to remove it again. Also, it's a good idea that I can look over everything while it's running. So let's see if it cranks into life. Let's put the key in. And let's see what happens. Oil light went out right away. And it seems to be running pretty nicely. It's really smooth. It's not all weird like it was last time I drove in here where it was a slight misfire right when it started up. It seems to be really nice and smooth. I'm only going to let it run for about 30 seconds or so, turn it off, we'll check the oil level. I'm also going to go up and open the bleeder screw as well. It was a little while ago I turned it off, so let's just check the oil level. Can't really find any shop rags, so I'm using this piece of paper. Should be fine. And we are down on the minimum. So I'm going to pour in the rest of the oil. We'll start it back up. I have cracked the bleeder screw open on the expansion tank, fill that thing up to the top now again. And then I'm just going to let this thing get up to temperature. It's been idling now for a bit. I just filled up a little bit more coolant. As you can see, it's still bubbling out of here, and I've cracked this one open a few times. So I will open that one up a little bit more when I see that it doesn't take any more coolant. I'm just waiting for it to warm up now. As you can hear, the idler or something is still making a little bit of a noise. Otherwise it's running really nicely and really smoothly. I mean, the engine, the rest of it sounds very quiet, very nice, so that's great. I believe it's a tensioner for a supercharger because it sounds more on this side of the engine, but I'll have to investigate that in a future video. Right now I'm just waiting for it to warm up to see if it comes higher up in temperature than it did before, to get the last of the coolant in there. I still have about this much left of what came out. It was at the correct level before, and it doesn't seem like I've spilled anything, and it looks nice and dry under the vehicle at the moment, so fingers crossed there are no leaks. And I will just let this continue. When I don't see the level go down that much anymore, I'll put the pressure cap back on and bleed the last out of here. But of course it might take a test drive or so to get everything down to the correct level and get all the air out of the system. I'm just going to let it sit and idle here and warm up, because I do have more things I want to do on this car before I bring it back onto the road. And there we go, that's up to operating temperature. And that's it for this episode, and I think I got quite a bit done there for a weekend. I mean, I wasn't working non-stop on the car, just a few hours here and there, because of course I have a family. Also, I've been recovering from a cold, so I didn't want to be out too long and get, cold and get sick again. So I'm feeling better now, but of course I'm still being a little bit careful with that. But I'm very happy with the progress, and I think it went pretty well. This car is fun to work on. The engine, everything's pretty accessible, except the belts up front. I got to figure out an easy way to get to those, because it has a big cooling fan there. It doesn't have electric fans, it has a mechanical fan, so I want to see how I can get to those belts. I do believe it's the idler for the supercharger that's making all the noise, but I want to confirm that and order the correct parts. So that's something I need to fix before she starts driving it. Also, I just got a text message that the parts I ordered for the next things are already at the post office. I'll pick those up a little bit later. Got rear brake calipers, and then we have an air filter, which I will replace as well. I did realize now, and everything had everything apart, that a new cabin air filter would have been a good idea. I forgot to order one, so the next batch of parts I'll order one of those as well, since I have all that apart anyways. And yeah, new tires, and then she should be on the road. So I hope you guys liked this video, and let me know what you think of it in the comments down below, and share it with your friends if you like it. Get some more people to join here Living with the Classic. If you haven't subscribed already to the channel, please consider subscribing. It really does help out a lot. And until next time, I'm Adam, and this was Living with the Classic. I'll see you soon.